Now, as a milk cow owner, I am always looking at ways to use milk. And I was super excited to try a new recipe from my Amish neighbor. And today I'm going to show you this super simple recipe to make a surprisingly close copycat recipe to Velveeta cheese. And today we're going to make Amish Velveeta cheese. Hey friends, it's Barbra-Sue at Kowalski Mountain and welcome back to the homestead. This is so good. I have to tell you, so good. Now here at our off-grid homestead, we live at the heart of our Amish community in our area. And when we first bought this property almost 10 years ago now, there were no Amish families on our street, though there is a large Amish community in the area. Now that we've moved here, and actually a couple years before we moved here, some Amish families started to move in, and now we have 3 families of Amish that live here on our street. Now on a recent visit to my friend Katie, who owns a little greenhouse where she sells plant starts at a amazing price. They are so cheap, it's hardly worth me starting them myself. Much cheaper than I can buy them anywhere else locally. I asked Katie if she made cheese, and she said she did. She makes a cheese called Velveeta. Now, I've heard several of our Amish neighbors talk about Velveeta. And actually one of our neighbors right here on the street, they told us that they use this Velveeta to make pizza, which I found very interesting that they don't make mozzarella for that. They use this Velveeta. Now I made it for the first time this week and it is so good. It's definitely a keeper here on the homestead. Now when you begin to transition from processed foods to homemade foods, it can be challenging to change your expectations because a lot of the homemade foods that we make are nothing like the processed foods that we might have eaten in the past, which is kind of the point. But it can still be a hard transition. Now, Velveeta is so much like Kraft American cheese that this is definitely a winner to Philip because he likes Kraft American cheese. Now, he and I have had the discussion on multiple times that Kraft cheese is a cheese-like product. It's not real cheese, but this is real cheese. And I'm going to make it today for you with raw milk. Now, Katie's recipe does not specify if I should skim the milk or not. And I decided to skim it because I wanted the cream for something else. A lot of my hard cheeses specify that I need to be using full fat milk. So I didn't want to miss this opportunity to save some cream. Now I just skim it until it starts to swirl so much that you can't help but get the milk. So this is still going to have some full fat in it. Now Meg, our milk cow, is on her second lactation. And we calf share, so that means that a calf, which is Duke, he tends to get the best of the cream because he eats after us. Now, something we started doing this lactation is we started letting Duke come nurse after I emptied her udder, and we are getting so much more milk. Keep in mind I have Dexter cows. They don't give near as much milk as a dairy breed, but by allowing him to nurse, I can get another 2 quarts of milk every day, which has really increased how much cream and how much milk we have to make the things we need on the homestead, and he's getting plenty of milk. Now for today's recipe, we're going to use a gallon of milk, and we're going to go ahead and get that in the pot and start heating it up. Now I have my heat on medium heat, and I am going to stir that on occasion because I don't want to scald my milk. And while that's doing that, we're going to go ahead and get the other ingredients ready. Now the really nice thing about Katie's recipe is this doesn't use any specialized ingredients. There's no rennet. The only recipe that you might not have is the citric acid. Now I keep citric acid on hand for canning, so I buy it by the gallon and always have a lot of it. But that is the one thing that you might not have at home, but it's very accessible ingredient and it's very cost efficient. Now I've already measured out 3 teaspoons of citric acid, and I have it in a half a cup of water, and that is there ready to dissolve because it needs to be fully dissolved before we use it. Now the next ingredient that we're going to add, and I'm just going to prep these, we're not going to add them yet, is we need 3/4 of a teaspoon of baking soda. Now to be honest, I didn't know why would cheese need baking soda in it. It seemed like a very odd ingredient to me. So I Googled it. Why is there baking soda in my cheese? And what it says, baking soda in a cheese sauce recipe helps to neutralize acidity and create a creamy, smooth, and less gritty texture. And I have to tell you, having made this cheese, it does exactly that. This is so smooth. It is so good. Now the next ingredient that we're going to measure out is going to be our salt. And this is Redmond salt, and I need 1.5 teaspoons. Now since this gets all mixed in together, I'm putting it in the same condiment cup. And then the last item I need to prep is butter. Now this is my own homemade butter, and I need a tablespoon of butter. Now I have the molds that make the little lines on my butter because that's how I'm used to using it. I know how to measure my butter using that mold, and it's a lot easier than weighing out your butter every time you need it. Now the molds look like this. They have the little lines in them, and they have a little cover, so they are super easy to work with. It does take a little practice to fill them smoothly, but I love making my butter in this mold. Now I want to watch my temperature. I don't want to burn my milk. And I need my glasses to see that. And we're only at about 80 degrees, so we got a little ways to go before we get to 140. Now I think while I wait, I will do my dairy dishes. Now for the safety of using raw milk, I always wash my dishes very, very well. We do not have a dishwasher, so I do have to wash them by hand. Now my washcloth, I have one specifically for my dairy things. I do not use my dishcloth that I use in my dishes in my dairy dishes. Now once I've washed it with as hot a water as I can stand, I spray the inside with peroxide. That is a 6% peroxide mixture, which is a little stronger than you can buy in the store. I get it at Azure Standard, and I buy it by the gallon. Now, peroxide is kind of expensive to buy, but you don't use very much. I only used about 1 gallon last year, and I think I'm into my 2nd gallon now. Now I'm going to let those jars sit for a few minutes with the peroxide on them, and then I'm going to rinse them. Now the other thing we need to prep is our draining container. So I do have a trivet to protect my countertop here. I don't have enough room on the stove to do this. I have my pot, and this pot is actually big enough to make this cheese in, but it's not, my other pot is not big enough to drain it. Now the next thing I need is a colander, and I need a piece of cheesecloth. Now this is actually butter muslin. And let me show you the difference. So this is my butter muslin. Has a very nice weave to it. This is cheesecloth I bought in the grocery store. This is good for nothing. Absolutely nothing. Don't waste your money and buy your cheesecloth for cheese making at the grocery store. This, even if you wrap this multiple times, it doesn't strain anything. When Joann's was going out of business, I did actually go in and try to find some muslin, but unfortunately I had already missed it. It had already been cleared out. So I missed my chance to buy it by the yard at a really good price. Now we're at 100 degrees. This pot is starting to get hot, and it's going to start to get really steamy inside that pot. So I actually use a spoon to hold on to my thermometer. And that way I don't have to reach my hand down into this pot where it's super hot and burn myself on the steam. Now this will just rest on the top to stay out of the way. The next step is I'm going to grease my container. Now the first time I made this cheese, I used parchment paper in the container. So I skipped greasing the container. Now the reason that today I am using a regular container and I'm greasing it is because I am trying to make a thicker loaf of cheese, because we want to be able to slice this and put it like on sandwiches and hamburgers. And so I'm hoping that this container is not too big. This is only the second time I've made this huge cheese, and I'm so excited about it. I had to share it with you, because even if you don't have a milk cow, this is a recipe so you can make cheese for your family. Whether you purchase raw milk, most cheeses can be made with whole milk that you buy in the store, not ultra processed, but you can make some of these cheeses and skip the processed foods by making your own. Now I'm generously I am generously greasing this with butter, because I want this cheese to pop right on out of here. And it is warm in this room, so I'm going to put this in the refrigerator. Alright, so we're almost to 140 degrees. We're there now. So we're going to go ahead and shut off the heat. Now this is where the magic happens, and I'm going to use my phone so you can see it happening. This is my citric acid water. I'm going to dump that in, and I'm going to stir it. And you can see the cheese starting to separate. Now, if you've ever used vinegar or lemon juice to separate cheese, this looks very different. This doesn't look chunky. It looks stringy, like a melted cheese. Now this part of the recipe, it just says to let it rest, but it doesn't say how long. So we're going to give this about 5 minutes. And now we're going to strain the cheese, separating it from the whey. Now I went ahead and put my pot and my colander down here in the sink. It's a little bit lower for me to pour. It's going to be a little bit easier. So let me get you set up so you can see. Now, just as a precaution, I'm going to go ahead and cover up these dishes. So now we're going to, you can see how this is starting to ball up. We're just going to kind of toss that around a little bit to get out some of the whey. We're not going to get too crazy with it. Now I'm going to set this aside for a second. Now that we have drained the cheese, we're going to go ahead and dump this back into the pot. Now ideally I would only use one pot for all this, but today we did use 2. Now here is where we're going to add our extra ingredients. We have our butter, and we have our baking soda and our salt. And we're going to turn the stove back on. And we're going to melt this cheese. We're going to go ahead and try to mix in that salt and that butter. We might begin to see this puff up, but we want to stir this until it is completely melted. Now I would really love, you are completely crooked there, sorry. I would really love to make this in a 2-gallon batch. But I think it would be super hard to melt. Now in all the cheeses I've made, this is the first one I've ever melted like this, where I melted the curds. So here's where our melting is at, and it's really hard to stir this and get you a good shot. So this is where we're at. Alright, I feel like this is as melted as I'm going to get it. Now this is still too big of a container. This is still too big of a container. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it on its side, because I really want this to make a block. Now I really wish this was open, not closed up like that. So I need to find a better container still. This is not the right one yet. And actually, this one might be. Let me butter that one. These little dishes were some dishes I bought at Joann's. Rest in peace, Joann's. Still disappointed about that. They were $1 each. I use them all the time. They are, this is going to be perfect. They are, you know, like the ceramic, but they're glazed. Now, the reason I switched was because I was afraid being closed up in that container, it was going to heat up and it was going to change the outcomes, and I didn't want that to happen. But this is perfect. I'm going to put this in the fridge. We're going to chill it, and I am going to show you how amazing this is. I can hardly wait. Now, the pot... The pot looks pretty intimidating to clean, but I found when I cleaned it with cool water, do it with cool water, not hot water. You don't want to melt the cheese. You want to be able to scrape it off. I use this little scraper. This is a Pampered Chef scraper, and I was able to scrape off all that residue, get that out of the sink, strain my strainers, all that good stuff, and then I washed the pot with hot water. And that actually worked pretty good. So keep that in mind. Cool water to do the initial clean of your pan, and then it's a lot easier to deal with. Now, I lied. Today that pot was hard to clean. I ended up warming up the water a little bit, but it was a pain to clean today. Now, I have omitted one item from Katie's recipe. Her recipe calls for an optional cheddar powder. Now, I asked her what that was, and she kind of acted like it was obvious that she buys this powder in bulk, and I guess she didn't really understand why I didn't know what it was. But I don't know that it adds to the flavor. It might, possibly. I definitely know it changes the color to make that look more like Velveeta. Today it's going to look more, or when we look at it when it's finished, it's going to look more like white American cheese. And we're perfectly fine with that. I will be back with you to look at the finished product when that cheese is completely cooled. Now, I forgot to tell you, with your whey, when you make cheese, you are going to have a lot of leftover whey. Only about 1/4 of your milk is milk solids. The rest is all whey. You can use this in baking. You can use it for lots of different things. You can drink it if you'd like. I use it to make cheese. I use it for my culture for Gouda cheese. This pot is probably destined for the garden or the pigs. Now, it is good for your garden. It's kind of a natural fertilizer. You can pour it in the garden, and we use it both ways. We use it in the garden when we need to, and sometimes when we get overwhelmed, it goes to the pigs. But you can use it however you'd like. It is the next day, and we are going to check out to see how our homemade Velveeta made with raw milk came out. Now, I did cover this with saran wrap last night because it was in the refrigerator and I didn't want it to taste like everything else in the refrigerator. We have a lot of fresh broccoli right now and I don't want this to taste like broccoli. Now, let me see if we can get this out of the mold. So let's see if we get lucky and it just comes out. No, that's not going to work. Whoa. that actually came out easier than I expected. Now that popped out of the mold way easier than I thought it was going to be. So all I did was, you know, butter it, and I had to pry it a little bit, but it did come out in one piece cleanly. Nothing was stuck in the bowl, so that's great. Now let's see how it slices up. It works. Now Philip and I have talked about, you know, whether we should slice it like this way so we have little pieces, or across so we have long pieces. I mean, it didn't come off cleanly either way, but you know, this is going to be perfect. Now unfortunately I already had lunch today, or I could have made some grilled cheese for lunch just to see how it works. Now friends, with owning a milk cow, I am always looking for ways that we can use our raw milk, because I don't want any of it to go to waste. And this is a super easy way to replace something that we already enjoy eating, and that being, you know, a meltable, smooth cheese that's good for sandwiches. And I bet we could shred this up in like macaroni and cheese also. So, and honestly, it's really good just to eat. Now remember, you don't have to have a milk cow to be able to do this. You can do this with store-bought milk, although I will say I have not tried it. But every cheese recipe I've ever made says you can make it with store-bought milk. It cannot be ultra-processed milk. So just be sure to watch that when you're buying milk. And if you try this with your kids, you're going to have to let me know. Alright friends, well as always, I really appreciate you watching, especially to the very end. If you haven't hit that subscribe button yet, hit that button. We'd love you to be a part of the Kowalski Mountain family. Thanks so much. We'll see you next time.